today is Sunday or another working day. It's okay. This one is going to be a quick one. I was scheduled between 5 to 7. I was trying to see if I can summarize what everything we have done for the past 3 times we met, so that we make progress, and at least I can beat my chest that you are now ready for the exam. By way of starting, I will just take you through some of the things that is important. Maybe in the next 5 minutes or less than 1 hour, I will be through. So please, I may need to be saying some certain things twice, but I'm doing it in a very summary format. Now, we need to know, if you hear social work, you need to know that social work has its roots or origin at addressing the problem of poverty and inequality. Social work has its roots or origin to address the problems that are associated with poverty and inequality. When you talk about poverty, it is a very common term, especially in Nigeria. When you say somebody is poor, the different segment of the society has a way of referring to poor, abject poverty, extremely poor. Say somebody is so poor that is dying of hunger and starvation. There are different categories of poverty. So once you mention poverty, poverty is self-explanatory. Inequality has to do with lack of equity, lack of providing opportunities for people to be able to develop to their full potentials. There could be inequality to access of resources, inequality to access of services, inequality to utilization of resources and also services. So we say that social work has its origin to address the problem of poverty and inequality. Now, addressing problems faced by individuals in the society have always evoked societal response, even before the formal social work that we know today. Addressing problems faced by individuals in the society have always evoked societal response. Society has a way of responding to those who are in need. That is the point I'm trying to make. In other words, society have always responded to the needs of its members from time immemorial. This spontaneous response in addressing the needs of the individual in the society is as old as man and can be found among the various cultures and the religions in the world. So it can therefore be said that this type of response is micro in nature, and the larger part of it was done through the extended family structure. For those of us who understand the African family structure very well, that is what we call the extended family structure. That was kind of what we operated in the past, where there is that communal way of living life. You become your brother's keeper. So we are saying that the larger part of societal response in addressing the problem of those in need is provided through the extended family, where you have your grandfather, your grandmother, your aunt, your niece, your uncle, among different relatives. Now, the world we are in today is changing, and the human needs are also becoming both dynamic and complex. As humans continue to struggle to meet up with their various life tasks and roles, there are challenges which confront them in performing these all-important roles in their life. There was a class I was talking about. As an individual, we perform different life tasks, we perform different roles. And during the course of performing these roles and these life tasks, we face different challenges. So these challenges that we face as individuals, as a people, prevents us from functioning very well, from performing our role and our life task very well. So social work comes in to help the individual to navigate through these challenges so that the life task that they are supposed to perform, they perform it very effectively. So we say that as humans continue to struggle to meet up with their various life tasks and roles, there are challenges confront them in performing these all-important roles in their life. Hence, the need for a formal way of responding to people's needs. There must be a documented way, a formal way, institutionalized way of responding to the need. No longer something that is based on charity. No longer something that is based on voluntary. If you want to do, you do. If you don't want to do, you don't do. Let it be institutionalized. Let it become a state responsibility to help the individual to be able to perform this life task. We now say that this is what gave birth to social work as we know it today. Social work programming, which is what we are doing, is the process of developing strategies at all levels of social work practice to address the challenges faced by the consumers of social work practice. I repeat, social work programming is the process of developing strategies at all levels of social work practice to address the challenges faced by the consumers of social work practice. Process, developing strategies, developing intervention at all levels of social work practice. Social work practice operates at 3 levels. We have the micro, we have the meso, and we have the macro. These are the basic ones. Now, what this definition is saying is that the process of developing strategies at all levels of social work practice, which is the micro, the meso, and the macro practice of social work, to address the challenges faced by the consumers of social work services. And I said in the previous class, by the consumers of social work services, we mean our clients, we mean our service users, we mean beneficiaries of social work services. I think I've given like 4 names trying to explain the clients of social work. When we say consumers of social work practices, we mean our clients. We mean those who make use of the services we provide. Or we talk about beneficiaries of social work services. Now, through social work programming, social workers promote human rights. Different programs, through those programs and interventions that we develop, we promote human rights, social justice, promote peace, try to manage conflict. What is in your material is conflict resolution. And I'm trying to, strike that out. You replace it with conflict management. The reason why social work perspective prefer conflict management is that conflict is an inevitable aspect of human existence. Many scholars have even argued that no meaningful development can take place if there are no conflicts. So because conflict is something we deal on our daily basis, even the way you are as an individual, that is not, you can have conflict within yourself. You can have a kind of disagreement. So conflict is not something that you will frown at. What happens most time is the way people manage conflict. That will determine what will either escalate the conflict or de-escalate the conflict. So conflict is good. Conflict is, to some of us, conflict is sweet. So from social work perspective, what we focus is on conflict management because there is no complete resolution of conflict. You cannot completely resolve conflicts. It is something we need to live with. That is why we prefer to use the word conflict management as against conflict resolution. I want to believe that point is very clear. So, through social work programming, we promote social change. Social change that is positive. We promote problem solving and sustainable development in human relationship, the relationship between one person and the other. We focus on empowerment and liberation of people and enhancing the well-being of individuals, families, groups, and communities. This is what we do through these different programs, through social work programmings we do. We enhance the well-being of individual, family, groups, and communities. Now, all these things explain why social work intervenes at the point where people interact with their environment. These things we do, that through our social work programming, we promote human rights, social justice, we promote peace, conflict management. We try to engender social change, change that are positive, change that are meaningful, change that are qualitative in nature, change that have positive impact in the lives of the clients. So all these things we are doing explain why social work intervenes at the point where people interact with their environment. And I've tried to explain that environment in this context mean the challenges the human person face while trying to perform their life task. So these challenges can be at the individual level, it could be at the group level, it could be at the community level. What is most referred to as the micro, meso, and macro level of social work practice. So we are going back to the 3 levels of social work practice. Now, at the heart of social work programming is the promotion of human and society well-being. Everything we do in social work programming is to promote human and society well-being. Should be at the back of your mind. Everything we do in social work programming, we promote human and society well-being so that life will be better for the people. It is believed that anybody that has a problem that comes to a social worker, the main fact that you had a contact with a social worker, your life will no longer be the same. There must be an improvement in the way you live your life. Now, a critical aspect of effective social work programming is teamwork. That was the first picture in the material you have, where you see people, staying together, discussing in a round table. So a critical aspect of effective social work programming is teamwork, synergy, and collaboration. Why is it so? Why is synergy, teamwork, and collaboration a critical aspect of social work programming? It emanates from the simple fact that complexity of human and societal problems have gone beyond what an individual or a discipline can effectively address. Why do we need synergy? Why do we need teamwork? Why do we need collaboration? It emanates from the simple fact that the complexity, the human problem is complex, dynamic, and the rest. So because of the complexity of the human and societal problem have gone beyond what an individual or a discipline can effectively address. It was in the last class that I was talking about rape and how different people from different disciplines could address a problem of rape. The social worker can provide psychosocial support. The lawyer can provide legal representation if there is need, for the court to hear the case. The police will help in investigation. The medical doctor will carry out some tests to determine the extent of what has happened to the injury, the harm that has been done to the person, so that appropriate treatment can be given to such individual. Now, because of this simple reason or analogy I just gave, collaboration, interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary approach is commonplace in social work practice today. So we work with different disciplines, we work with different people from different backgrounds, try to make sure that we provide a holistic intervention to the consumers of social work service. So somebody can now ask, what does interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary connote? What it means is that others bringing in their own expertise. You are working with people in their own expertise, in their own field. They are bringing their resources. They are bringing their wealth of experience and knowledge for a better, productive, and effective and efficient service delivery to the consumers of social work service. That is why all this multidisciplinary teamwork, synergy, collaboration is very important, so that people will come and bring in their own expertise, bring in their own resources, their wealth of experience and knowledge for a better, a productive, effective, and efficient service delivery to the consumers of social work services. Then the next thing that can now come to mind is, who is even a social worker? You know, some days ago, we are doing, okay, like a year ago, we are doing some programs. You see students, International Day of Social Work. You know, you see students carrying placard, we are social workers. We are social workers. I just laughed within me. People were like, what is it? You are still a trainee of social work and you are shouting that you are a social worker. I'm not saying that you're not going to graduate. But for you to be able to be qualified to be called a social worker, you must be trained in the field of social work with the requisite skills, requisite knowledge, techniques, etc., to be able to practice social work. Of course, in Nigeria, and according to Act 25 for 2022, you must be licensed by an authorizing body to be able to practice. And in Nigeria, the body that does that as of today is the Chartered Institute of Social Work Practitioners of Nigeria, for you to be able to answer that name, social worker. And that is the process some of you are passing through. Some of you are doing intermediate professional examination. What is the whole essence? The whole essence is that as you are graduating, you have done your IPE with the Chartered Institute of Social Work. As you are graduating, you are being inducted, you pay for your license is given to you. You now become a licensed social worker that can provide social work services. If you are not licensed and you are providing social work services, you are like a quack doctor that is practicing without license. So let some of these things be clear to us. It is your responsibility. I'm now talking to you as students. I've tried to do some definitions. Some of the areas you need to focus so that you do very well in your exam. It is your responsibility to know the different roles performed by the social worker. Social workers perform different roles. I don't need to begin to tell you. Some of you must be in your third year in the university. So you must know who the roles of social work. It is your responsibility to also go and research about the roles performed by social workers. Roles like advocacy, broker, etc., enabler, facilitator, teacher, activist, among other roles of social work. It is also your responsibility to know the four purposes of social work. The four purposes of social work. The first one talks about to enhance the problem solving and coping capacity of individual. The second one was talking about to link people with available resources and the rest. The third one is talking about to promote humane services. The fourth one was talking about to contribute to the development and improvement of social policy. It is your responsibility to know the different role played by social workers. You may not see it in the material that you have. Definitely, you may see it in your exam, and you cannot give excuse because this is social work programming. So you cannot be doing social work programming without knowing the role social workers play while doing those programming. I also need to have it at the back of your mind. What are the purposes of social work? Basically, social work has four purposes. You'll be able to list some of them. So I'm going to hold you people responsible about the rules of social work, about the purposes of social work. I also hold you responsible for the different problems social workers address. If I begin to ask you now, you will begin to list more than 1 million problems that social workers address. I'm very sure you know those ones. So I'm going to hold you responsible for the different problems social workers address, as well as the various practice setting of social work. By the practice setting, we are talking about places where social workers can work. Let me be giving you the expo. Should be able to know the different practice setting of social work. Now, for us to be able to practice as social workers, we apply our professional values, principles, and techniques to address social and economic problems. That is what we do. We address social and economic problems, working towards bringing about positive change in the life of the client. Change is not for the sake of bringing change. You understand? Somebody that is drinking 1 bottle of beer today can decide to start drinking 5 bottles tomorrow. That is a change. It has changed from 1 bottle to 5 bottles. Do you understand? That is a change, is it not? But when we are talking about change within the social work context, we are talking about change that are qualitatively better than the existing ones. So you can now say somebody was drinking like 5 bottles of beer and they try to become a drunk and is causing problem in his or her family. now having an interface with the social worker. And because of the intervention of the social worker, the person was able to reduce to 1, planning to see how he can end taking 1 bottle at all. That is a change. We are bringing change. We have moved the person from 5 to 1. It's a gradual process. But you can also move from 1 to 5. That is also change. But we're talking about change that makes impact, positive impact, that makes the life of the client we are working with to be qualitatively better. That is the kind of change we mean. Anytime you are talking about change in social work, be very, very specific. Some of us who are old enough, we knew that we changed government in 2015. And the particular party was shouting change as a slogan, change, change, change. And actually change came to Nigeria. But people cannot be able to measure the magnitude of change that has come. But whether change came, there was change. Whether the change is positive or negative, it is not in my position to begin to say it. We are all products of the Nigerian society. We are all bearing the brunt of the economy of the nation. The impunity that goes on in high places among those who are supposed to be custodian of the law, those who are supposed to uphold the sanctity of the Constitution, among other issues. That is not the place for this class. Now, we have just made the point that social workers apply professional value, principles, and techniques to address social and economic problems, working towards bringing about social change. Please, emphasis is on positive change that impacts better well-being for the client being served, not any type of change. You also need to know the difference between the ideal world and the real world as social workers. I think we talked about that in the last class. You need to know the difference between the ideal world and so the social worker is trying to dream about the ideal world, the world where everything functions very well. The world when you graduate from school, you have a nice job. You work for like 2 or 3 years. You rent an apartment, you buy one small car, you get a wife, or just get married and begin to raise your family. If you want to pursue your higher education, you can just enroll for your higher education. You can pay your fees installment. Just you move ahead. That is the ideal world. While finishing school, you're getting a job, but in the reality, what is the reality? After 10 years of graduation, you are still being fed by your parents. So social work, dreamed of how to achieve the ideal world. And I've made the point that the ideal world is in extreme right. The real world is by the left. So the closer the real world moves towards the ideal world, we can now say that there is development, that the life we are living is kind of qualitatively better than what exists. So as social workers, we consciously make effort to see how the gap between the ideal world and the real world is reduced. We try to reduce the gap between the real world and the ideal world. As trainees in social work, we need to know that effective social work programming is evidence-based. It's not something that you do by guesswork. It is something you can feel, something you can touch, something that when you are doing it very well, you see the result. That is why it is evidence-based. It is not tales by moonlight. And it is designed to deliver positive outcome for the people. That outcome must be positive. It must impact meaningfully. It must impact positively in the life of the people. What this means is that it must address the problem of the population we serve. The social work programming we are doing must, it is a must, address the problem of the population we serve. Now, there are principles of program planning in the materials you have. There was one that was enunciated by Tracker 1955. There's another one by P.D. Mishra. This principle of program planning, it is your responsibility to know those principles. So go and read them up. I repeat, the principle in program planning, the one enunciated by Tracker 1955 and P.D. Mishra. So be conversant, please, I'm begging, be conversant with them. There are a number of factors to also consider while going for program planning. These factors include the general factor, the individual factor, the group, and the resource factor. All of them are in your material. The general factor speaks to the fact that program must take cognizance of the fact that facilities and tradition of the community program must be designed to fit into the needs and requirements of the group members. So the program you are doing must take cognizance of the fact that the needs and requirements of the group members are captured. It will speak to the needs of the group members. The individual factor take cognizance of a wide range of activities that will be age specific. That is why it is individual factor. It must take cognizance of a wide range of activities that will be age specific and consider capacity and motivation of those involved. What is motivating people? You are working with a group. What is their motivation? What is, this intervention, is it age specific? You cannot be developing intervention with an elderly person and use the same template for the youth. If you are doing for today's elderly person, you may not include ICT to get your result. But if you are including the youth, you must include ICT because that is what is the intent now for the youth. The group factor makes case for size and composition of the group. How big, how small is the group you are working with? So you must consider the group factor. And this may vary. The group factor may vary according to the purpose of the group. Then the resource factor, consider money, resources, resource factor, resources, asset. This one considers money, material, and other assets, which may be benefits to the program you are doing. Which other materials are beneficial? These are the resource factors. Now, the different approaches to social work programming are casework, institutionalization, group work, and community work approach, or community organization. The 4 methods of group work approach are problem solving, functional, crisis-oriented short-term casework, and task-centered casework. We explained all this in, I think, maybe on Friday. Problem solving, a method that solves problem. That's from the name. So I'm going to hold you responsible for each of the different methods of casework, which is the type of approach in social work programming. So I say I'm going to hold you responsible for each of the different methods of the casework, which are problem solving, functional, crisis-oriented, short-term casework, and task-centered casework. There are also elements responsible for successful outcome in casework. Elements are characteristics. So there are elements that are responsible for successful outcome in casework. I'm going to hold you responsible on that. If you look through, if you have your pen, you can be taking notes of some of these things so that when you have your material, it will guide you on where you are going to lay some kind of emphasis. Now, I will urge you to read extensively on the importance of working with groups and purposes of group. There are different purposes of group. Some are task specific, others are for recreational. There are like up to 10 or 13 purposes of forming a group. Should be able to be conversant with each of them. I can just come and ask you, a group that is interested in making sure that people will do exercise, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm talking about recreational group. Now you need to also make yourself conversant with horizontal and vertical ways of community analysis. The community analysis that we have, the horizontal and the vertical ways of community analysis. The horizontal that speaks to the relationship within the different institutions within the community, and the vertical, the relationship between the institution and the community and the help outside the community. You also need to be conversant with the various stages for community development, things like organizing credit group. We talked extensively about organizing credit group yesterday. Revolving scheme and enterprise education. I will talk about their importance Talk about credit group, people making contribution on monthly basis. And through their little contribution, they have a pool of resources where they lend out at a very subsidized. This is an approach or strategy for community development. We talk about revolving scheme, where a philanthropic or a government provide fund to a group, and each member takes those fund in group and use it to establish their business or their enterprise. We talk about enterprise education, among other issues. Another issue you need to be very conversant is on program evaluation. You cannot successfully do social work programming without putting into consideration program evaluation, where you begin to assess or appraise a program to know whether it is in line with what you have set out to achieve. Program evaluation, the process of assessing or appraising a program to know whether it is in line with what you set up. When you are doing your planning, you have your objective, you have the goals that you set out to achieve. So when you do your assessment, you do your planning, you begin your implementation. So you are doing your implementation, you are doing your evaluation to know whether your intervention is working, whether it's addressing the problem that it is set out to address, that you want it to address. There are two levels of program evaluation. We have the formative evaluation and we have the summative evaluation. I said that there are two levels of program evaluation. I say we have the we have the formative evaluation and summative evaluation. At formative evaluation, social workers assess the services they provide to each client. When we assess the services that we provide to each client, to be able to understand the effectiveness of the work and measure the impact of the program on the client, the work we have done, what is the impact on the client? Now, at summative evaluation, social workers are relating activities with goal. Those activities that you set out to do, you are now beginning to connect it with the goals that you want to achieve, to measure how activities are achieving the goals. Which activity is responsible for what goals? Sometimes it is difficult to know which activity is responsible for what. For example, you can be doing counseling. During counseling, again, you can also be doing task-centered. If a mixture of counseling and giving a task was able to solve a problem, you should be able to say, yes, counseling and task. If it was able to, so those activities, when you begin to measure activities with the goals that is being achieved, it is also important as social workers or student trainees or trainee social workers, the need to first understand the key issues or nature of the problem or client of our service user. We need to understand, if we have a client, we have a service user, we need to first understand the key issues or nature of the problem before we decide on the method of intervention. If you did not understand the problem very well, you may employ the wrong intervention and you may be treating the wrong ailments. It's just like going to the hospital. Somebody is having stomach, running stomach, and you are giving the person drugs for headache. That is why it is important that as social worker, we need to first understand the key issues or nature of the problem of the client or service user before we decide on the method of intervention. While we are working with the client, exposing the different intervention to the client, the whole essence is to help the client to make what is called an informed decision, a decision that is based from the point of knowledge of the consequences, the pros, the prospects, and the consequences of each intervention. Now, at any particular point in time, we are designing programs for our clients. The intervention we use must be appropriate to the client and effective for the situation. There are age-appropriate intervention. So the intervention we develop during social work programming must be appropriate to the client and effective for the situation. You also need to know that while engaging or providing an intervention, the social worker needs to practice both ethically and competently. If it were this is a practical class, I will begin to ask you, if I say you need to practice ethical, what do I mean? You need to practice competently, what do I mean? So you need to know that while engaging or providing intervention, the social worker needs to practice both ethically and competently. Ethical practice focus on observing necessary social work ethics, principles, and code of conduct, so that we don't derail or expose ourselves to what is malpractice suit. I repeat, ethical practice focus on observing necessary social work ethics, principles, and code of ethics, so that we don't expose ourselves, so that we don't derail from what we are supposed to do or expose ourselves to what is called malpractice suit. I want to believe that we all know what malpractice suit is. If not, go and make your private research. Ignorance is not an excuse. Malpractice suit. From the word malpractice, you now know what is malpractice suit. Or maybe I'll go ahead and give you a little hint. A legal action taken against a social worker as a result of professional misconduct. A lot of that happen in US and Canada, in UK and some other places. In Nigeria, a lot of impunity happens. So if they say malpractice suit, you'll be like, is that one working in Nigeria? So because you are being trained, you also need to know, you need to practice ethically so that it will guide you not to derail, so that you will not, when you are providing these services to your client, trying to make the life of the clients better, making all the sacrifices, committing all the resources, then you are now facing a malpractice suit as a result of professional misconduct. But do not forget that ethical practice focus on observing necessary social work ethics, principles, and code of conduct, so that we do not derail or expose ourselves to malpractice suit. Competent practice speaks to developing interventions or practicing in a way that your actions and activities are addressing the problem of the client. I said that competent practice speaks to developing interventions or practice in a way that your actions and activities are addressing the problem of the client. So a client cannot meet a social worker and his or her case becomes worse. If that happens, what it means is that the social worker has a very big question mark. And I'll give you an example. Maybe a family has been managing depression for like 6 months, and they were like, there is this social worker we know. Why not we take our relative to that place so that the social worker will help us? Then after 2 sessions with the client, after the social worker had 2 sessions with the client, the next thing you are hearing is that the client has committed suicide. That will put a very big question mark on the competence of the social worker. It is a bad social work practice that a client, after coming in contact with the social worker, his or her situation worsens. I think I've given a classical example to that effect. So let's run along. And I'm thinking it is not an overstatement to say that at the highest level of programming, practitioners must combine their experience with critical thinking. As a social worker, you are a critical thinker. You must be a very good critical thinker. I will share with you an experience with one of our colleagues, who is also one of those coordinating this IPE program. Social worker and Bina, you must have seen him. We are walking through the street one day. So we saw this water tanker, this truck that carries water, dispenses water in people's home. Then we saw this little girl that was pushing a barrow at the back of the tanker. So it seems as if the girl is not seeing the tanker coming. So we are like, what is wrong with this girl? Is she normal? So the tanker had stopped. So we are now moving forward, hoping that the girl will meet us. So as we are moving towards the girl is also moving towards our direction. So we're at a point we're going. So we wanted to scold her so that her mind will be where she's walking. Then all of a sudden, the young girl just bent down and started urinating. And I just touched my colleague and said, bros, we will find our way they go. You cannot be talking to a young girl that is around 13, 15 years that is urinating on the road. And people will begin to question you, what are you looking at? Do you understand? So that was how we quietly passed and left the girl. I'm talking about being a critical thinker. Critical thinking will help you as a social worker to avoid some unnecessary problems during this practice. There are a lot of sacrifices that we are making already as social workers. Critical thinking will also help you to understand when clients are playing pranks. Some will pretend that they are indigent to a client. By the time you visit their family member, you discover that nothing is wrong with that person. Now the person is from a well-to-do this thing. So some clients also play prank. They manipulate the benevolence, the intervention of social workers to begin to even manipulate the social workers and the people that are helping them, or people that are rendering one form of service to them. So critical thing. So I'm saying that it is not an overstatement to state that at the highest level of social work practice, practitioners must combine their experience with critical thinking skill to be able to design, evaluate, and implement effective social work programs and policies. It is important to know that to design a strong, effective, and successful social work program, the social worker needs to identify the following issues. For you to be able to design a strong, effective, and successful social work programs, you must identify the following issues. You must identify how to navigate administrative and organizational hurdles. I've talked about bottlenecks, bureaucracy, hindrances to services. So many places, services exist. And go and have access to the service, go and utilize the service, it becomes a problem. There are individuals within the agencies that is providing these services that are making it difficult for people to be able to access these services. So you should be able to, one of the issues you need to deal with, how to navigate administrative and organizational hurdles. Things like government filing or filling of form. You need to see how you can build awareness for a program. That program you are engaging with. How popular is the program? Who and who have heard about it? The way you build awareness matters. How to monitor and evaluate and plan for future changes and challenge. You look at it. You must take care of the issue of how to monitor, how to evaluate, to make sure that your program or your intervention is in line with the objective that you have set out for yourself. And also how to plan for future changes and challenges. I've told you that the consumers of social work services, the human beings, they are very dynamic. They changes a lot. So you may see something at the beginning of your intervention. As the intervention progresses, the individual begins to change because human beings are dynamic. You need to make intelligent adaptation as a social worker to be able to deal with these changes that the client is coming with. Now, because planning and designing issues in programming can be challenging, a good strategy to make the decision process easier include conducting an assessment to identify needs and gaps. I'm making the point that planning and designing issues in programming can be very, very challenging. And a good strategy for you to make the decision process easier is to conduct an assessment to identify needs and gaps. You need to conduct an assessment to be able to identify the needs and the gaps. And I have previously talked about the beauty of choosing assessment over diagnosis. We made that point yesterday. Why diagnosis perform a single role, assessment perform double roles. Diagnosis helps you to identify the problem, while assessment take a step further to consider the resources available to those needs. When we are working with the client, there are resources within the client system that can help you to solve the problem. We talked about social mapping. And we said that social mapping explore where and how people live and available social infrastructure. Things like roads, drainage systems, schools, drinking water, facilities, etc. Also know that in community, social mapping is made by local people, the people that do social mapping. are the local people. Why? The reason is that it is an authentic way of determining what the social reality looks like for locals. It is them, what it looks like for them, not for you, that is the social worker that came to work in their community. We try to define needs, and we say that needs can be defined as the gap between what is and what should be. I remember talking about the ideal world and the real world. I also made mention of it during the course of my presentation today. And we say that a need can be felt by an individual, it can be felt by a group, or it can also be felt by the entire community. A need can be as concrete as need for food and water, need for shelter. These things are the physical ones, the ones you can feel. But there are also abstract needs. So while you have tangible needs, you also have intangible needs. The tangible needs for shelter, you have to put your head. Need for food, feed yourself so that you become strong. You have energy. You understand? Need for water, among other things. The abstract ones have to do with improving community cohesiveness, the cohesion that goes on in the community, interpersonal relationship that move from one person to another, relationship that move from one group to another, relationship that these are the intangible needs. Those you cannot see, but they're also very important in community development. We talked about resources or assets, and we said that resources can include individual, organization, and institution, building, landscape, equipment, anything that can be used to improve the quality of life. We are making reference to resources. Sometimes it can be natural resources. And we've made the point that in the history of humanity, the biggest resource available to human beings is the human person. You, me, you and I, we are the biggest resources for this universe. And when we say that every individual is a potential community asset, and everyone has assets that can be used for community building, we mean that the way you are, every individual have the capacity to contribute meaningfully to societal development. So it cannot go and negate a particular person or a particular group and say there is nothing they can contribute. I gave an example of a 2-year-old child that is in a family. At least the child have a responsibility of making the family happy. So it is your responsibility as a social worker to identify the various resources in different individuals and how you can harness them to improve the quality of life. Then we'll talk about asset mapping, say that it is a process used to identify individual, group, and community assets that can be used to work on a project. So those individual, group, and community assets that can be put to work on a project are asset mapping. So you are mapping out when you do your asset mapping, which resources are available in the community. Now, individual and group assets are defined as their gifts, talent, expertise, knowledge, and resources. And I have consistently made the point that social mapping should not confuse with asset mapping. I said that I've made the point that social mapping should not be confused with asset mapping. And I've made the point yesterday that asset mapping is a subset of social mapping. Now, the three types of asset mapping include the personal asset mapping, association asset mapping, community asset mapping, and I'm going to hold you guys responsible for each of the asset mapping. We also need to identify those who should be involved in developing a plan for assessing local needs and resources. We talked about that yesterday, or 2 days ago. I think that was on Friday. Identifying those who should be involved in developing a plan for assessing local needs. And that was when I made the point that at any point in time, if you are developing an intervention for any group or people, the beneficiaries of that intervention should be the first, most important stakeholder in driving the entire process. At any point in time you are developing an intervention for any group or people, the beneficiaries of that intervention should be the first most important stakeholder in driving the entire process. We gave example of adolescent girls, teenage girls. If you are developing intervention for them, make sure that they are the critical holder that we are working with. Why must we involve them? There is a popular saying that he who wears the shoe knows where it pinches. Now, I also made the point when we are trying to talk about the stakeholders to get involved with. In doing community entry, the most important stakeholder to work with are the community gatekeepers. If you want to enter a community to do a project, the most important stakeholder to work with at that level is the community gatekeepers. And who are the community gatekeepers? Depending on the dynamics of the community, they could be the traditional ruler, could be the town union president, it could be the youth leader, could be woman leader. Once you're able to penetrate one of the gatekeepers, then the gatekeeper will now take you to meet other stakeholders in the community. And once they see that person, because he's a person of authority, a person the community trusts, he will sell you, the person will help you to sell your intervention or your projects. We also made the point yesterday that it is important to note that needs and asset identification, identifying needs and identifying assets should take place at almost any point in your initiative. We are not saying that you can only identify assets and needs at the beginning, maybe at the planning. When you are not implementing, you ignore it. No, the human being is dynamic. The human being changes. So needs and asset identification should take place at almost any point in your initiative, during your planning, during your assessment, during your implementation, during your evaluation. It is a continuous process. That was the point we made yesterday. Now, the first step for successful social mapping is consultation with the people to identify an appropriate time and place for the exercise. If you want to do your social mapping, the first step is that you need to consult with the people to identify an appropriate time and place for the exercise. And I made the point yesterday, you cannot just, if you want to do social mapping, you cannot just bash to the community and tell them, hey, come, I want to do social mapping. If you come, somebody will tell you, I'm going to my farm. The other person will tell you, I'm taking care of my sick mother. But if you consult with them, you choose an appropriate time and appropriate place so that when you come, you continue with the business of the day. I also made the point that it is always very important to work with influential groups and the individual within a locality for better social work programming. Talk about the importance of working with influential groups, influential individuals. And in selecting influential group, the grid, there is that table I was trying to explain yesterday, X, SS, and the rest. The grid is a very useful guide because it contains the name, the category, the size, the rating of each group that can help the social worker make informed choices about influential group. Finally, please note that social work programming is all about providing the right type of environment for people to live a better life. Everything you are doing about social work programming, everything you are doing about social work programming is about providing the right type of environment for people to live a better life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Any question, any response I'm going to clarify?
No, sir.
If that is the case, I wish you a very good luck in your exams.
Sir, will this be our last session for the week? I think this is the end of your class, right?
This is the end of my class, yeah.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a good evening.
Yeah, have a wonderful week ahead.